Please remember to subscribe to our channel so you can receive more English tales. Many individuals desire to become confident speakers of the English language. I recall being a young learner, just like many of you, and feeling the urge to speak English fluently. I longed to express myself well, but I was often unsure of myself and made countless errors. Then one day a teacher remarked, "Consistent daily practice will unlock your fluency." Those words changed my perspective. When you truly desire something, you need to dedicate effort toward it. Fluency doesn't happen in a single day. It's like growing a plant. You sow the seed, water it, and offer it sunlight. You tend to it daily. Over time, it blossoms into a strong, healthy tree. The same logic applies to mastering a new language. A student once came to me feeling discouraged, saying, "Teacher, I want to speak English, but I always forget vocabulary." I offered her a comforting smile and said, "Don't worry, fluency isn't about memorizing every word, it's about consistent use." She looked relieved and asked how to practice regularly. I explained that practice exists in all corners of daily life. Chatting with friends, listening to stories, and even singing. There's always a chance to reinforce what you learn. When I was in school, I loved listening to bedtime stories. My teacher would read them, and I would echo the sentences. At first, I was slow and hesitant, but through repetition, I picked up speed and gained confidence. Once, another student questioned, "Is fluency about talking rapidly?" I clarified that fluency is more about clarity. You need to make your message understandable, not necessarily quick. One boy in class used to speak so fast that nobody could follow him. I advised him to slow down, use simpler terms, and enunciate. He followed my advice, and soon everyone grasped his words. His self-belief soared. Fluency is indeed a journey. You advance step by step, without rushing. One day you'll look back and realize how much progress you've made. I've guided numerous learners who began timidly but transformed into eloquent speakers through persistent effort. There is a straightforward secret to improving fluency: listening. Whether it's stories, music, or casual talks, the more you listen, the more you pick up. I remember a student who was passionate about songs in English. She listened to them daily and eventually started singing along. Her progress skyrocketed through this repetitive exposure. Another essential tip is to embrace your mistakes. They are excellent teachers. I recall a student who was scared of speaking because she feared mockery. I urged her to accept errors as lessons. Later, she spoke up in class, stumbling here and there, but kept going. Eventually, she gained courage and improved. She told me, "Teacher, I'm not afraid anymore." That turning point marked the beginning of her journey to fluency. It also helps to think in English. Translating every phrase from your native language can slow you down and confuse you. I advised a student to try thinking in English even when he was alone. Gradually, he spoke more naturally. Another student who enjoyed conversation faced a problem. He'd begin a sentence in English and then flip to his mother tongue. I told him to stick with English and find ways to describe words he didn't know. This focus helped him speak entirely in English before long. Reading is a wonderful tool for developing fluency. It shows you how sentences are structured and reveals fresh vocabulary. When I was sharpening my English, I read straightforward texts. Whenever a new word appeared, I jotted it down and formed a sentence with it. That technique helped me retain vocabulary and apply it effectively when I spoke. A student once told me she read a book but couldn't grasp every part. I assured her that complete understanding on the first try isn't necessary. Consistent reading brings clarity in time. She continued reading daily and eventually noticed significant improvement. Listening to your own voice is another valuable exercise. Record yourself, then replay it to identify possible enhancements. I knew a student who did this consistently. She read stories aloud, recorded them, and analyzed her speech afterward. This awareness helped her refine her approach until she spoke more fluidly. Teaming up with a friend can also speed up your progress. I had two learners who spoke only in English to each other. Whenever they stumbled, they would assist each other with vocabulary. As a result, they made strides in speaking and found motivation in the process. Using the language in everyday encounters is equally vital. If you're in a shop or out with friends, attempt to converse in English. A student who worked in a store started communicating in English with all his customers. Though challenging at first, it boosted his poise and speech over time. Staying curious accelerates growth. Whenever you come across a new term, investigate its meaning and try it out soon after. I recall a student who constantly asked me to define unknown words. He then squeezed those words into as many sentences as he could, expanding both his vocabulary and fluency in the process. Likewise, it's essential to have a clear objective. Ask yourself what pushes you to learn English. One student aimed to travel to an English-speaking nation. This motivation fueled her daily practice, and she reached a comfortable level of fluency before embarking on her journey. I also urge learners to savor the adventure. Fluency doesn't appear like magic. It takes patience. But if you find pleasure in refining your skills, you'll maintain enthusiasm. A student of mine enjoyed watching English language films every evening. Initially, he relied on subtitles. After a bit, he tried without them and found that his skills had improved and his confidence soared. Repetition is at the core of fluency. Doing something multiple times polishes your skills. A student enjoyed repeating phrases he heard in class over and over until they became second nature. Soon, those phrases started showing up in his everyday chats. Communicating with diverse speakers also develops fluency, as everyone uses the language differently. Once had a very reserved student who practiced English solely with me. I urged him to expand his circle and speak to classmates too. Though he felt anxious at first, he gradually adapted and learned new ways to express himself. You might find it useful to talk about areas you love. When you're passionate, you speak effortlessly. A student was crazy about football, so he spoke about it daily. His enthusiasm helped him speak more, refining his language skills along the way. Keep in mind that you won't always know the precise term for something, and that's perfectly okay. Try describing it in simpler words and continue the dialogue. I remember a student who froze whenever a particular English word escaped him. I encouraged him to rephrase or explain it another way, and this strategy kept conversations flowing. Learner once asked me, "How long will it take to be fluent?" I explained that it differs from person to person. Consistent effort is crucial, so he should stay committed without worrying about the exact timeline. Steady practice invariably yields visible results. Another helpful tip is practicing in front of a mirror. Watching your facial expressions and gestures makes you more conscious of your delivery. A shy student tried this technique and soon noticed an increase in self-assurance. Eventually, she spoke up more in group settings. Someone asked, "Teacher, what if I can't recall a word mid-sentence?" My advice was, don't panic, continue speaking and use replacement words if needed. He embraced this counsel, stopped interrupting his own flow, and became more at ease speaking. At times, a pause or rest from studying is beneficial. Overdoing it can lead to burnout. One diligent student practiced non-stop, but then felt overwhelmed. I suggested taking breaks to clear her head. After resting, she resumed with renewed energy and saw better results. Get creative while using the language. Write short compositions, sing songs, or produce video content. One pupil adored writing daily English stories. As she read them aloud, her expression got better and better. Sharing knowledge can also boost your own skill. By guiding others, your own understanding solidifies. A particularly advanced student decided to mentor classmates who struggled with speaking. That experience improved not just the classmates' abilities, but also her own. It's beneficial to establish a schedule, perhaps practicing speaking for 20 or 30 minutes each morning. A student followed such a routine faithfully and soon noticed his fluency improving. Sticking to a plan helps form good habits. Additionally, patience is your ally. Fluency requires time and persistence. I recall a student who felt frustrated by slow progress. I reassured him that each little step contributes to overall success. He stayed patient, and one day he could see how much he'd advanced. Remember, fluency isn't limited to talking. It involves listening intently. Paying attention to how others speak can inform your own responses. A thoughtful listener in my class always paused before replying, which gave his words clarity and depth. Staying upbeat is another huge advantage. If you keep a positive mindset, the process feels less daunting. I taught a learner who was always cheerful, even when she tripped over words. Her optimism kept her engaged, and she reached fluency faster. It also helps to step beyond your comfort zone from time to time. Engaging with people outside your usual circle can bolster your communication skills. A timid student of mine grew more secure by venturing to speak English outside the classroom. Though it was daunting at first, she ultimately thrived. Observing proficient speakers is another trick. Watch their style, intonation, and body language. A student who admired a prominent English speaker began mirroring his rhythm and expressions, which significantly raised her own speaking level. Fluency relies on a variety of elements: practice, perseverance, listening, speaking, and embracing errors. Each aspect matters. I once used a cooking metaphor for my students. Preparing a delicious meal involves mixing different components in proper proportions. This analogy helped them realize the importance of all parts of language learning. Don't forget to acknowledge small wins. Mastering even a single new word or getting through a short conversation with ease deserves a pat on the back. I had a student who celebrated each milestone. Her sense of achievement spurred her to keep improving. A learner asked how to handle getting stuck mid-speech. I told him that a brief pause is acceptable. Breathe in, collect your thoughts, and proceed. He found that helpful and stayed composed even when words momentarily slipped his mind. Keep applying your newfound knowledge. If you learn something today, test it out soon in actual communication. One student made a habit of learning one new word a day, then weaving it into a sentence or two. This strategy boosted his confidence and integrated fresh vocabulary into his speech. Gain insight from your environment. Road signs, posters, and menus often have English words or phrases that can broaden your knowledge base. I had a learner who delighted in exploring the city. He'd read every sign in English and tried to decode it, expanding his arsenal of words. It helps to show curiosity about the culture, since English varies by region. One of my students became fascinated with British English, watching shows and absorbing British traditions. This provided a well-rounded perspective and refined his usage. Remember that nonverbal cues also contribute to fluency. When you speak, body language can underscore your message. A student who excelled at gestures appeared exceptionally natural, even when employing simple terms, enhancing his overall effectiveness in communication. Sometimes, pushing your boundaries by discussing an unfamiliar topic teaches you new expressions and concepts. One sports enthusiast made a point to chat about science. It was tough initially, but he broadened his vocabulary and eventually could hold intelligent discussions. Fluency also improves when you relax. When your mind is at ease, words come smoothly. A tense student was encouraged to inhale deeply before speaking. Calming his nerves led to more coherent and confident language use. Posing questions is another way to engage with people and strengthen conversational skills. I recall a student who habitually asked classmates how their day went, what they were passionate about, and what they enjoyed doing. This constant interaction deepened his fluency. It's good to reflect regularly on your growth. Perhaps keep a journal to note each week's progress and challenges. One student maintained such a record and realized exactly how much he was advancing. That recognition spurred him onward. Adaptability is key, too. If someone can't understand, you try rephrasing. A student in my class was adept at adjusting his statements until his listener grasped them. That skill improved his communication in numerous settings. Learning with others can be motivating. Join a group or club, exchange experiences, and practice collectively. A learner I taught attended an English club weekly and found that the support propelled her speaking abilities forward. Setting small, attainable targets is better than grand, vague ambitions. Instead of declaring, "I want to be completely fluent," aim for something like, "I want to master 5 new words this week." I had a student who outlined little tasks every week. Achieving them boosted her self-esteem, and step by step, these little successes accumulated into marked improvement. Finally, persistence is essential. Even if you face setbacks, persevere. I knew a student who struggled significantly and often considered quitting, but he continued. One day it clicked, and he realized he was speaking far more fluently. Sometimes, revisiting old lessons can be enlightening. A quick review can reinforce past knowledge and encourage you that you've come a long way. A dedicated student of mine revisited her notes monthly, reminding herself of forgotten points, which strengthened her speaking abilities further. Maintain an open mind when confronted with variations in speech. A curious student once took an interest in multiple dialects and noticed that hearing English from many sources helped him adapt to diverse styles. Try to find enjoyment in English, whether through literature, films, or songs. I once taught a poetry lover. Reading verses daily, deciphering metaphors, and appreciating rhyme made her more enthusiastic and improved her fluency. Asking others for their honest perspective on your speaking can be enlightening. A student always asked for my thoughts post-presentation. This feedback loop helped him refine his strengths and minimize weaknesses. Flashcards are great for memorizing new terms. Note down tricky words and flip through them routinely. I had a student who collected vocabulary on cards and reviewed them every evening. It significantly boosted his retention. Additionally, be comfortable pausing during conversation to gather your thoughts. A student feared silence, believing he must speak non-stop. I reassured him that taking a second to think is natural, and this tip helped him remain calm and clear. Learning phrases rather than isolated words can also elevate your fluency. A student who focused on familiar expressions found that she could speak more effortlessly because her sentences fit together neatly. Having a broad range of interests can help too, because it provides more subjects to discuss. I recall a student passionate about history, which offered her plenty of material to chat about in English and kept the learning process engaging. The path to fluency might feel slow, but it brings tremendous rewards. It's similar to a flowing river constantly heading toward the sea. Every ounce of effort propels you forward. Ultimately, fluency isn't merely about flowing speech. It's also about forging connections and sharing your perspective with the wider world. Each newly learned term and every carefully constructed sentence expands your horizons, letting you communicate with more people and make new friends. Therefore, keep learning, keep talking, and allow your distinct voice to shine. Before we conclude, I want to pose a question. What keeps you inspired? On your quest for better English? I'd be delighted to hear your answer.